Hello everybody, welcome back to Harvest Season on Gelvin Valley, Farming Simulator 15. Wonderful map by Wild Wild West. If you need to know why it's wonderful, just take a look at that scene over there. Just an outstanding job with this particular map. Although I have a feeling we are farming it a little bit differently from how he would have intended. I think this was a hayfield in here. We ripped it all out with the chisel plow, and now we turned everything into an arable farm. But what can I say? Well, what can I say is, I seem to recall now that we've had some debts paid off. We had some opportunity with a great demand with canola. I was kind of bemoaning the fact that I put in some canola. Now I'm glad for every bit of it that I had. We sold all of it and made some money. We paid off some debts, and I'm not that far from being broke even. I'm negative here for a little while, but you know what? I think if I take care of, do some baling. Actually, let me go back here and get this moving again. I bale up all this straw and sell it like I have in the past, I might just be back above zero again, and that's before I sell a lot of the crop that I had here for this harvest season. And I'm trying to keep an eye on both barley and wheat. I think I have some wheat in storage. I've been waiting for the price to get above, what is it, 200? It all depends on where things are at as to what's going to be valuable to put in the ground. I ended up planting a lot of barley, whereas the last harvest season I dragged everybody through was a whole boatload of wheat. So this time I didn't plant a single stalk of wheat. I did mainly barley and a little bit of canola. And I think this coming season, when I plant again, I'm going to try to be even more thoughtful with it. We'll take a hard look at prices, kind of where they are. And like maybe you've seen, I'm on fast play at the moment. So hopefully that means whatever I see happening in the markets is somewhat where my harvest season's going to land in terms of pricing. So I hope it allows me to plan a little better as to what I should plant to make the most profit. Alright, I have a feeling I'm going to have to go help my tractor because horseplay, well, it's horseplay. Enough said. I'm going to get this last little dab and get this set up here. I'll wait till it totally folds up so I can leave it that way. Of course, right as we get here, there it is. Kissing the fence. Before it can figure out how to go downhill. So we'll just help them out. There. Take our combine assignment off. As soon as he's done, there we go. I think that's what we need to do. And we'll come back over here. Transport it over. This is my second episode I'm recording tonight. Right on the heels of getting home from our vacation. I know I started sharing some of that in the last episode. So to bore you all a little bit with it further, I think I basically described the first day, or tried to, so maybe if I hurry up I can get through the rest of it in this episode here. As I'm headed the right way here in the field. So the second day, I think I explained in the last episode who we had. My favorite part of these trips, because like I say, I'm not a fisherman. It kind of was Well, I was about ready to say something. If my boys ever listen to this, of course they know I'm not a fisherman, but let me just say my favorite part of trips like these is what goes on in the evenings. When we're together as a family, when we're at the dinner table, when we're doing stuff kind of in the evenings together, whether it's games or just talking. Those things that bond a family together that are just, in my mind, just critical to a family being kind of what a family is. So it's in the evenings that I really appreciate these trips, more so than being out on a boat fishing. And this particular trip, um, like I've mentioned numerous times, I'm not a fisherman, and because they were in a lake, the first day where you couldn't have a motorboat, all they could go out in was a small canoe. So I didn't accompany them on that. I stayed with my wife. Um, Combine, what are you doing? It's real simple. Real simple. Just turn 90 degrees and take the new cut. There you go. Yeah, not sure why it's so hard to figure out, but it is. So the second day, they decided to go to another lake in the area. This one was quite a bit larger, and this one allowed for boats with motors. However, by this time, my daughter and her boyfriend were there, and they also wanted to go fishing, both of them, and so they were going to be in the boat. And I mean, this isn't a very large boat at all. I think I mentioned we borrow it from my father. And, when we were kids, my father had 5 boys. He could carry all 5 of us, in this boat, and we could spend all day out there fishing or whatever. But kind of like I was observing to my sons, we were quite a bit smaller back then. So that tended to work a whole lot easier than you could do it now. I imagine you could still haul 5 adults, or 6 adults rather, if you had to, but you'd be in each other's hair, and yeah. The boat would be a little more, oh, I wouldn't say tippy, just you'd have to pay more attention when you're out with it. So with 4 adults, it's comfortable. One can sit in front, one in back to run the motor, and 2 kind of in the middle. And since I'm not a fisherman, I just opted to stay home. Uh, I say stay home, stay at the house that we had there with my wife and with my aunt and uncle, or her aunt and uncle that were there, spend some real good time with them and take care of the dog. We didn't until the last day take the dog out on the boat because based on some past experience with her, but I'll share maybe a little bit more on that later. So they all take off early in the morning. It works for me. I'm kind of a night owl, and so I just slept in the morning. Really enjoy doing that when I have time to do it. Um, it's a luxury I don't get very often. Being that I got to be to work at regular time like everybody else. So it's kind of nice to indulge in that a little, on vacation. But they headed to this other lake. They took the boat out. Well, we were gonna haul up to the lake. We were gonna take them lunch, and the lake from where we were staying was probably about an hour's drive. So, it was a little ways away. And so we got it all packed up. We were just getting ready to head out, and we get a text from my daughter saying that they were basically going to be coming home as soon as they could. And oh, by the way, if we could have a fire in the wood stove, so they could dry off and warm up, they would be happy. We're like, what in the world happened? Well, come to find out, they did a little bit of fishing out there. Apparently, it was pretty windy. The water was pretty choppy. Um, And just what all that means, I don't know. I wasn't there, but I've been out in conditions like that before. Where there's, I think one my son described white caps kind of on the water, so must have been blowing pretty good out there. So they were doing what they were doing, and they came upon, I guess in a large lake. What my son has told me, what he likes to do in terms of fishing is he looks for the inlets to the lake where the rivers come in. There's obviously it's got to come in from somewhere and it goes out to some place else generally. He likes to do the inlets. He said there's a lot of fish that hang around in those areas, so he wants to be there kind of where the river channel is and where the lake bed starts to drop off. There's kind of a ridge in there, and he says there's a lot of fish that end up feeding in there or whatever. And you know what? I was with him on the last day, and it turns out he's right, or at least knows what he's talking about, somewhat. So they were kind of exploring one of those areas of the lake, which was clear on the other side of where they put the boat in. Well, they get over there, and they come upon these two guys who apparently are my vintage. They were in their 40s. They had been out for a week or so. They'd been out for a week and had been camping. And in a number of these areas, there was only one area where you could access the lake, where you could put a boat in the water, and it was clear on the other side of the lake from where. No, 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 don't go back there. And so these guys, two friends or whatever, had set up their camp long ways away from where they put their boat in. All they had was a canoe. Although my boys said the canoe was a little larger than normal, and it was big enough that they had this small outboard motor on it. So I don't know if they literally witnessed it happen, but these guys ended up capsizing their canoe. And I almost think they saw it happen. They were out in the channel. They weren't out in the lake proper. But when I say channel, I mean, we drove the boat through there today, and it was, there's areas of it that are 40 feet deep, 40 feet of water. It really dips off pretty quick. So, this isn't just an area to take lightly, even though it is somewhat narrow in there. So they turn over their canoe. All of their stuff is floating on the water. They had several ice chests. They had their tent. They had a stove of some kind. They had all their fishing gear. All the stuff you think about when you go camping on a lake or whatever, was now in the drink. And kind of like I described earlier, it was a bit cold. It was windy. The water was choppy, and that's kind of where they got into trouble. They said one of these guys was a pretty portly fellow. They said he had to be over 300 pounds. He was just a big dude. And they didn't comment on how big his friend was, but he was pretty oversized. So when you put him in there, his friend, two of them in there, an outboard motor, which was pretty heavy, and then my kids then helped these guys retrieve all their stuff. So he said some of this was extremely heavy. So they had cans of pop and stuff in there and all kinds of stuff they had hauled on their trip. And it was very heavy, so I think they overloaded their canoe. Maybe when they went out there, it was calm water, and so they were able to get over there with no problems. But I'll tell you, you get some choppy white cap water with a little canoe, and they just started taking on water, and eventually it sank and then turned over, and um, my boys watched them swimming towards shore, and went over to kind of to help them pick up the pieces and rescue these two guys. I told them, I wondered if they didn't even save their life. It when you get to my vintage, I don't do much swimming in that kind of deep water. These men, they weren't in clothes for swimming. They had on their boots and jeans and heavier clothing and coats. Nobody swims and stuff like that. And so they just went over to help these guys and help them tow their boat over to shore, to kind of salvage it. And we don't have that big of a boat. So these two men, I think they were given rides, and it took several trips to haul their stuff from one end of the lake to the other, and probably, like I say, we don't have that big a boat, so we maybe could go 10 miles an hour on the water, which isn't very fast. That just gives you some idea of what kind of boat it is. Just a little fishing boat, to where they could haul some extra stuff. So it would take, oh goodness, was it about a half an hour to go across this lake? I mean, it's a pretty good size lake. So, I mean, you could do the math. A round trip is going to take about an hour. So, and they made a couple runs doing this, to go pick up the stuff, haul them there. And one of my sons was just commenting later, it's like if they would have had to hike out of the, or assuming they made it to shore, um, it would have been miles. I think to hike around the lake proper was 13 miles if you were going to do that. So if you were clear on the other side and had half of that to do, you would have to hike literally 6 miles. I mean, that's a terrible long hike, especially if you have to do it a couple times just to haul all your stuff out of there by hand. I don't know that there was any place to take a vehicle back there. I'm pretty sure there probably was roads, but they're all blocked off. To contact the Forest Service to get access. I mean, who knows, what they would or wouldn't be able to do. But I was really pleased with. Maybe I'm kind of bragging on my kids here a little bit that they stopped their own enjoyment of fishing just to help these people out. So I wasn't there. I didn't get to witness any of it. Just heard about it later. They came home sopping wet. Our boat ended up having some extra water in it too. And, they were just wet, shall we say. So I made sure we had a roaring fire in the wood stove for them, when they returned. And it wasn't really, the temperatures around here have been kind of mild. We're not talking anything really cold. But you know what? When you get in the cold water, it's just basically snow melt, although it isn't that. I mean, it's warm by the summer. I think they said they thought the water temperature was maybe 62 degrees or something like that, Fahrenheit, or maybe it's 58. So again, not super cold, but I think everybody knows the human body is, 90 something degrees. If you're in that for too long, you can get hypothermia, even though it isn't wintry weather out and whatnot. So anyway, good day all around, helping these guys. Added some excitement, and it seemed kind of strange starting a fire this time of year in the cabin, but we ended up burning a few sticks of wood so they could dry off in their clothing and whatnot. And the following day, which would be Friday now, they were back at the original lake that we first went to when we first got up there. So once again, this lake here, you have to be in a kayak or a canoe. So that meant I couldn't go out there with them. So my two boys went in the canoe. My daughter and her boyfriend, they went out in kayaks to do their own fishing or whatever. And so we ended up taking lunch to them at the lake, having a lunch with them. My wife and I did some hiking. And it was actually really warm that particular day. This time we hiked on the opposite side of the lake, came up to the other side of where those fellows were working on the trail. But yeah, it was very warm, kind of almost unseasonably. I think there's just a brief warm snap in here, so just short sleeve type weather. And You know, you see all kinds of people on here. This particular lake, it's not that far off the beaten trail. So so there's a lot of people that came. I mean, even tour buses with people that came in. And so Joe Q Public out in full on full display, and like I say, you always meet interesting people at these. And uh, out in the lake, as my wife and I were going off to hike, we saw this guy that he was swimming, and he had this orange float or whatever, and he was just doing the regular crawl stroke, and he went across the lake while we were walking, and then he came back the other way. Ooh, what are you gonna do here? Let me try to help you out. Maybe I get you around. What do I do if I do no combine and reach? Stop driver. I was just amazed at how in shape this person was. You know, there was no stopping. He what do you mean no combine and reach? Oh, for goodness sakes. He went clear across the lake, granted not a huge lake. Um, I think I mentioned before the trail around it is 2 miles, so you can get some idea of what it would be, the circumference anyways. So swam all the way across it, swam all the way back, and then as if that wasn't enough, he turns around and he starts swimming back again. I have no idea how many laps he did in there, but I was just impressed at someone who's in way better shape than I'll ever be, swimming across the air and doing that. I thought a couple mile hike was plenty for this old man. So let me see here. Yeah, warm swimmers. Looking at a couple of notes I made. So Friday was the last night that we had at our little cabin there. So we made the most of it as a family. Cooked burgers. Ran out of gas in the grill, but it lasted just long enough that we could get it all done. I think my son that particular day caught the biggest fish of the trip. And I say biggest, it isn't huge fish by any stretch of the imagination. I think he said it was maybe 17, 18 inches. Something like that. So, the biggest of this particular trip. I know the lake where we would have gone has those routinely and much larger. Oh, is a combine having... There is something about this corner up here. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't quite like turning the corner. Must be the steep slope that tricks it out. Go figure. I think I have this on. Yep. So he ended up eating some of that for supper. You know, so it was nice, beautiful, fresh fish. They're definitely the best to eat when they're fresh. And I gotta say, not only am I not much of a fisherman, I'm not a huge fish eater myself. There's some fish I'll eat, uh, but I don't know. You know, salmon. I know some people rave over salmon. That, to me, it always seems a little bit dry. You know, I know when it's cooked properly, that it can be really good. I know my son went with one of his friends for a birthday excursion once. They did some fishing out on the Pacific Ocean, straight out of the surf. There was a guide that they had that took them out in these dory boats and went out there. I think he got sick as a dog, but man alive, some of the fish he brought home were just tops. Some of the best I've ever had in my life. I think they're the sea bass, and just awesome. Uh, ever as good as a steak, which tends to be my preferred meat of choice if I'm gonna have meat. But anyway, so I didn't have any fish this particular night. Everybody else cleaned it up, but I think it was pretty good. So the last day, which was today, Saturday, we returned to Timothy. That's the name of the lake that we went to. All right, you're gonna. Oh my goodness. You know. Oh, we love the fence. We do, we do. Let me try to help the guy out. Is that close enough? What are you doing? You're trying to drive behind the combine, but you're driving way over there. How about you come to where the combine actually is? So like I say, my aunt and uncle went home early. We had to check out at 11 a.m. My daughter and her boyfriend also chose that time to leave and head home. So it's just my wife, my two boys. So we returned to this lake where you could use the motorboat. And so this time I got to go out there with them. And I do wish I would have taken a book with me. That's what I've done a lot of times in the past. I really enjoy being with them and hearing their banter and giving it right back to them at the same time. But I really could have used a book. So we were out there just several hours on there and watched my boys catch several fish. A lot of them were pretty small, but that's kind of where I learned. I think that, I mean, they just know way more about fishing than I do, and it's some of the tools that they use to do their fishing are just fascinating to me. You know, one of them that I saw today that I didn't even realize that they had, it was this little squeeze bottle that had what looked like a hypodermic needle kind of on the end of it. And I asked, it's like, well, what in the world is that? Because I seen him get it out, and he says, oh, that's kind of a worm aerator or something like that. I forget how he put it. I'm still like, what? So he puts a worm on his hook, I mean, a good old-fashioned night crawler, and then he takes this little thing and he blows the worm up. He injects some air into him, and it's like, well, what do you need to do that for? And he says, oh, so it'll float. And so they will drop their line in the water, which has weights on it to carry it down, and if you didn't have bait that floated, the bait would go and sit on the bottom of the lake. So they want their bait to float up above wherever the weight takes it. So the line goes down and the worm goes down with it, but always stays above it, if that makes sense, because it has added buoyancy in the water. Well, who knew? I mean, back in the day, we never used something like that. And so it's just seeing kind of a different tool. So it's like, guys, just make sure you don't stick yourself with that thing, because I think if you get an air bubble in your own bloodstream, it could be fatal. But just kind of cool to watch them and see them do what they do with the fishing. So we went to one of the inlets to the lake, and sure enough, that's where there was a whole bunch of fish. Most of them, like I say, were fairly small ones. My son caught another larger one that he ended up keeping. But most of them, they just ended up throwing back. They just do it for the fun of it, to catch them. And who knows, for all I know, maybe more than one of those fish were repeats. It's a little ticklish sometimes to get the hook out of them when they swallow it clear into their stomach, and sometimes you can't do much about it. I think a lot of the hooks that they use anymore will disintegrate on their own, given enough time. So I guess that's a type of metal. I'm not sure how all that works. But so apparently if you're not able to get them out, it's still okay to just cut the line and let them go. So we were there. They showed me kind of where they rescued those guys, and I could see just how long of a distance that was to bring all the stuff back. And then when we got done, My wife and this time our puppy went out, and we've tried taking our dog, this particular dog, out in the water. It's taken her a long time to warm up to water. It used to be she couldn't stand to even have it on her paws, and she was just so dainty. We would call her a princess the way she tiptoed around the stuff. But over time, we've gotten her a little more used to it in my father's pond to where she feels comfortable in the water. So we got her in the boat. She really didn't want to go in the boat. So we had to basically pick her up and put her in there. But she kind of curled up on the bottom, didn't try to bail out, didn't whine about it. So they took her out a little bit. So who knows, maybe in the future. And there was a lot of other dogs that we saw out, including on paddle boards and everything, to where there was no hiding it. I mean, these dogs were standing on basically a wooden board or whatever they're made out of, surrounded by water, and they didn't seem to bat an eyelash at it. But ours did, so we're trying to be careful and not just forcing it on her, but hopefully helping her get used to the idea. So that was kind of fun. Um, I gotta say, being involved in the fishing today, I was also involved in the activities that went along with it. When you have a boat and you're trailering it at the dock, and kind of like I was mentioning earlier, you run into all sorts of people in OQ public, and my vision of a boat ramp, if you will, is you back your trailer down in there, you get your boat off, and then you get your butt out of there. Well, not so with some of these other people down there. I mean, my son told me later as we were coming in, we were out on the water for probably 5 hours, and he said he watched the same people that parked beside us on this narrow boat ramp offloading kayaks of all things, that they were parked there for hours and had just driven off, when we got there. Well, in my mind, that's a no-no. You should get your boats off and then get out of there so other people can use the ramp. So, but what do I know? I'm not a boater. All I know is, like, if you people are going to park there and I'm going to be backing a trailer down, then hopefully there are no consequences called crinkled tin. And fortunately there weren't. I don't have any trouble backing up a trailer. Lots of farm training there. That's another thing that could be entertaining in its own right is, a number of folks, it's challenging to them to back up a trailer. And so some good entertainment can be had if you go to a boat ramp where there's a reasonable amount of activity and watch some people try to back themselves up. It doesn't always work the way they intended, shall we say. So the only other comment I make on the lake, which both my wife and I noticed, most of the time these mountain lakes, and that this is going to be on the restrooms, and I don't know how this is in other states a lot of times, or how it is in other countries, but when you go out into the the boondocks, fortunately, a lot of these places do have a place to go to the restroom and take care of your needs there, and I appreciate that. But most of the time, these are basically open sewage pits. I mean, they stink to the high heaven. There's no flushing mechanism. You open the top, and what everybody else has done is down below. Maybe they cleaned it out the week before. Who knows? The one lake that we went to, it was just smelly, messy, awful. And people don't always take the best care of it. So there was a lot of garbage on the floor and whatnot. And just really was a bad place. And of course, you're always leery. It's like, you mean, I'm going to go in there and park my naked rear on this seat that who knows what has been on it. And and anyway, I mean, most of them seem to be that way. It's just not a very pleasant place, and most of the time, I know in our experience, especially my wife, you know, you just wait till you're back to the house where you're staying to take care of business. This particular lake, I really got to give them props. And my wife actually saw the people who were taking care of the restrooms. And she saw them come by twice to clean them up. And whoever these people are really are doing a wonderful job at this particular lake. It actually didn't stink when you went in there. It was the same type of setup as the others, but the floor was clean. They had hand sanitizer. They had, and I realize, you go up in the mountains, you can't always expect running water, hot water, electricity, some of these niceties that you have when you're closer to town. But these guys were really doing a great job, so that stands out as something you don't always see when you go to these kinds of places. So we got the boat all wrapped up and then headed the 2.25, 2.5 hours, whatever it was, to get back home here. So, it always seems like a crazy amount of work to get all set up so you can take a trip like this, and then it's a crazy amount of work just to unpack everything, put it all away, and do what you need to do to get back into regular life or what have you. So glad we can be home, but glad we could take some time away. Maybe I asked in the other video, I'd be curious what all you guys do when you take a vacation, especially with the family. If I realize someday I'm no longer going to have kids at home. I mean, we have 4 children. 2 of them already left home. I have just my boys here. There's maybe a few years of this, and then probably when my wife and I take a vacation, it's going to look a little bit different. It's probably not going to include fishing if it's just her and I. So I'm not talking about those kinds of vacations, but those of you listening, if you have family, what kinds of things have you done with them? I realize families do all sorts of different things. And I grew up kind of going on fishing trips, and even when I was a boy, I didn't really enjoy fishing trips all that much. But I know my dad really enjoyed fishing, so you know what? That's kind of a common theme. Whatever the parent enjoys doing, you end up dragging your kids along. And, honestly, I did not do a good enough job when my family was younger, taking them on trips like this. We did some, but I really should have been more on the ball and fed my boys' interest more than what I did. So I'm trying to make up for it now by taking these trips with them, and so hopefully we can get some of that in there, and I don't just force them to do, the things that I enjoy doing. But I realize sometimes to a parent, I mean, that's what so that's kind of what you have them do with you, just to do something as a family. Anyway, I'm way over time, so thank you so much for spending a little time here to listen. I really appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful day, whatever you're doing, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.